Welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. Tonight we have an eerie case of why did that happen? There's no explanation. To this day, I don't have an answer for this, but it did happen because I was there. So if you think eerie things can happen to an engine, you're right, they can. So let's take a look and see what this was all about. You're going to enjoy this one. So here's the story, and I'm sticking to it. I get a call from our truck shop, and they tell me that they just finished doing a service on one of the units, and they had a really difficult time starting it. And they're getting pretty good at doing services now and knowing how to keep the filter loose, key on to fill the filter, let the lift pump fill it so we don't put dirt in the filter and all that kind of stuff. And so they did that, and they just had a heck of a time getting this to start. They almost called us down there, and they got it to start. So they started. It's running in the shop. They open the door. They drive it out. It's running outside. The guy cleans his bay up, and then he takes it to park it. And the thing has got a check engine light on, and it's as he said, a real dog. So this had a stick shift in it. It didn't have an ultra shift or anything. Regular old stick with a clutch. So the check engine light wouldn't go off. They shut it off, started up a couple times, and then they finally drove it over to us. Now they had no idea what the fault was, but there was actually three active faults: 325, 323, and 332, and they were all for the rear bank, what we call the rear bank, the last three injectors of the engine. So the engine was running on only cylinder number 1, cylinder number 2, and cylinder number 3. And because it was a common rail engine, the ECM was making the engine run very smooth on those 3 cylinders. Now, we're talking about bobtailing, no load. And so they drove it over, and the guy came in and he goes, "It sounds normal. It sounds good, but man, is it a dog." And so I go out and hook up to it, and this is what I find, what you're seeing right in front of you here. And you can see this snapshot that you see is over the course of 2 days. I've blended them together. So the top half was the first day, and the bottom half was the second day, where you see those 325, 323, 332 inactive. Now this is what we did trying to get these faults inactive. We did a long key off for 5 minutes and a restart, no problem. Fuel pressure and everything like that was normal. I recalibrated the ECM at the time that we did this. This was the current revision for this calibration. Didn't change anything. I went in and I cleared all the injector learns, they call it fuel codes. The injector learns, each injector learns its own code. So I reset all those, so it had to relearn them. That didn't help. So we checked the harness. It was okay. I unplugged the harness going into the head, plugged it back in, it was okay, and plugged the ECM, plugged it back in, it was okay. Actually put the test tool in the ECM plug and checked from there to the injectors that were faulting out. The harness was good, no problem. So I was at a loss. I tried to do the injector cutout test, and it just verified that 4, 5, and 6 were not running. And so I call that a bank. And I guess inside the ECM, there's basically 2 injector drivers, and one drives 1, 2, and 3, and the other drives 4, 5, and 6. So we thought, well, maybe the ECM failed. So it was time to go home. We shut the truck off and went home. So the next morning, I'm at home thinking all night, what I'm going to do, what to do. Should we try an ECM? I really didn't know. So the next morning, I thought, for the heck of it, I'm going to start it up and see if I can get it to run. And I started up, and it ran just fine, and all the faults were inactive, and I cleared them. And I had the truck shop come down and test drive it. They said it runs good again, and the problem was solved. And that was probably 8 months before I made this video, and that truck is still running today just fine with no problems. So now talking about the Erie things, what do I think happened? Well, I do know that in many cases there are prerequisites for the ECM to actually clear faults. And if a fault is active, usually that system is disabled. So we had an active fault on the injector driver, which caused 3 injectors to not have any current return. So for some reason, the ECM would not fire that injector driver, which is really just a big power transistor. I don't know if it's a MOSFET or a power transistor, but it's something on that order. And in some cases, you'll read in the how to clear this fault, it'll say, let the engine cool down, or warm the engine up to 180 degrees, or the oil temperature has to be this, or you have to get it so hot and do a key cycle. You have to read all that how to clear faults section, because sometimes there's strange conditions that you have to follow to clear the fault. So I think on this particular case, the problem was the engine needed to get completely cold overnight, oil cold, coolant cold, because by now the water's up to operating temperature because we've been messing with it for an hour, and the oil's up to temperature about over 200 degrees anyway. So that's what solved it, letting it sit and cool off overnight. So this was a strange one, and I talked to a couple people, and everybody kind of scratched their heads. Even the guy that we talked to at Cummins that helps us, he goes, I really can't tell you. But again, the truck's running just fine. It's been 8 months ago that this happened, and it runs out of our office, so we'd know if it had a problem. So if you know the problem, leave it in the comments. I'd love to know. This is one that got me. So thanks for joining me on Engine Shop Joe. We'll see you next time.